Now we are going to talk about red blood cells or erythrocytes. They are also called erythrocytes. So what are red blood cells? They are highly specialized cells made in the bone marrow. So red blood cells are made in a part of the bone that is called the bone marrow. Here, for example, we have the bone. This part on the inside is called bone marrow. If we magnify it, we see white blood cells being made and red blood cells being made. So the bone marrow is where the red blood cells are made. Also, it is where the white blood cells are made. But our focus right now is on the red blood cells. In each cubic millimeter of blood, there are millions of red blood cells. Actually, it's around 5 million per cubic millimeter of blood. So if we have 5 liters of blood in our body, that means we have trillions of red blood cells in the human body. And the structure of each of these red blood cells is adapted to its function. So what is its function that the structure is adapted to? So, the main function actually of the red blood cell is to transport oxygen. The transport of oxygen in the body is by red blood cells in the blood. Red blood cells contain hemoglobin. This is an iron-containing protein. It is a protein that contains iron in it. Here we see this hemoglobin. It combines with oxygen to form oxyhemoglobin. So oxygen combines with hemoglobin in the red blood cells, which forms oxyhemoglobin, which is the combination of oxygen and hemoglobin when they are bound together. This oxygen comes from the lungs, from the alveoli into the capillaries, which contain the blood, which contains red blood cells, which contain hemoglobin, and the oxygen will bind to the hemoglobin, forming oxyhemoglobin. So hemoglobin plus oxygen is going to give us, as we said, oxyhemoglobin. This is driven by the high concentration of oxygen found in the lungs. They will diffuse into the blood where they will bind to hemoglobin. Now, when the blood reaches the cells that it's supposed to give oxygen, oxyhemoglobin will break down into oxygen and hemoglobin again, and this is driven by the low oxygen concentration in tissues. Oxygen needs to diffuse out of the blood and into the tissues now, but it is in the oxyhemoglobin form. It can't leave the blood vessels as oxyhemoglobin. So oxyhemoglobin has to break down into hemoglobin and oxygen. They have to stop binding, and this oxygen can now diffuse from the artery into the cells of the body that need oxygen. And here we can see the oxygen being released from the red blood cell because it is no longer bound to hemoglobin. So how does the structure of red blood cells serve this function of transporting oxygen from the lungs to the cells of the body? So red blood cells are biconcave, disc-like structures, which means they are curved and they look like discs, and they have not exactly a hole in the middle, but like a small dent in the middle. It allows efficient exchange of oxygen in and out of the cell. They have no nucleus. This means that more hemoglobin can be packed into each red blood cell, so more oxygen can be transported. They can fit more hemoglobins. And they also have thin cell surface membrane, which allows oxygen to diffuse into and out of them easily. Also, they have high surface area to volume ratio. This is caused by the dent that they have on the inside. It is like a fold, which gives a large area for diffusion. So oxygen can diffuse into them easily, and they can fit a lot of hemoglobins.